didn't come up this time. Screen share. Where am I? Shoot. Daryl, it's not on there anymore. Daryl, do you hear me?
Yes, Alice, I can.
When I went back to try and reopen, I'm not seeing the icon for my presentation.
Oh,
It's
all right. Well, let's see. Why don't you, so you have your PowerPoint up.
No, I don't see my PowerPoint now.
Okay. Why don't you, I'm seeing your other things up, but not your PowerPoint. What if you stop sharing and go back and make sure your PowerPoint is open and then come back in and try to share it?
Oh, that may be the problem. All right. Please forgive me all. Let's see.
That's all right. I did that. I've done that a couple times where I have to leave and go find it again, open, and then come back to the share button.
Okay, now. Okay, now wait.
Morning, Deanne.
Good morning, Daryl. How are you?
Great. Good to have you. See, we got Chuck. We got Chuck on too.
Good morning.
Morning. And we have Krista. We're just getting set up here, so get everybody on and introduced, and then I'll also be ready. Okay.
You again very confident. I am not. There we go.
That's
all right.
okay. That's okay. If we have any trouble, John's on now. He can give you directions.
I'm on. I think I'm on. Yes.
Okay. Good.
Now let me go to here. How does that look to everybody?
Oh, we can see it.
Yes, sirree, Bob.
Yeah, that part is good.
I'd much rather be out in the garden than messing with computers.
I can't imagine why.
Well, a confidence level.
Yeah. Okay, give people another minute.
All right. I think I've got the feel for how this is going to work. Is my volume all right as far as my voice quality?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Can everybody hear Alice? Nodding, yes?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Good, okay.
Thank you.
All right, well, besides our some of our regulars, we have got some guests today. So see some more folks coming on. Welcome. Fernando and Jessica, welcome.
Good morning.
Right. Morning. Okay, so besides the folks we've had on, we have some guests today. We have Alice Hill, who's our presenter. We also have a couple of growers who use greenhouses or high tunnels, so that'll be good. So they're tagging in from Kansas and Texas. So let's see who else we got on here. Linnea, good to have you, Linnea. And so I'll introduce our guests when they come up as responders later. But Hope everyone's doing fine. And I sent you some information about Alice Hill, but we'll go ahead and just start out, Alice, and you can introduce yourself and start in with your presentation about topless high tunnels.
All right. Well, I appreciate this opportunity to share an idea that has been developed over quite a few years and was perfected during this past year when we moved to the north central part of Kansas. For 40 plus years, I raised various garden vegetables in northwest Kansas. That's zone 5, high winds, big hail, bitter winters, lots of bugs, everything wanted to eat whatever you grew. And I experimented with different ideas, and this is what the result was. It's a modified high tunnel, and it eliminates much of the issues that traditional high tunnels create. While certainly traditional high tunnels offer excellent protection from storms and things, they're also vulnerable to storms. And I did learn firsthand, as we'll go through these slides, just how quickly a structure can disintegrate in a big storm. We grew our vegetables primarily for guests that came to our hunting lodge. I had started out with the CSA, then I went to more of a market garden type where we took vegetables to town. We sold vegetables to our own restaurant, actually supplied our own restaurant with vegetables, ended up just mostly feeding our guests at the hunting lodge. And that was the most direct marketing I could think of. I didn't have to leave the farm to do it. It was excellent. So anyway, I'll tell you about the modified high tunnel. From this picture, you can see the essential structure of it. The top portion is an anti-hail netting. Below that this is facing east. The front of it faces east, and then it's on an east-west setting. Then the side walls, instead of being roll up or drop down, they're solid. So we'll go on here. Many of you know what a conventional high tunnel is, and so I'll make this pretty brief. It's traditionally grown for monocrops that are at the high dollar end, grown in long parallel rows, but they offer protection from storms, animals, a variety of things. And one of the things I would like to point out right now is that part of the reason people are putting up high tunnels is to protect vegetable crops from the drift from pesticides or chemical sprays, dicamba especially being one. I do not know what the topless high tunnels protection is on that level. I don't have any way of testing that. It would make a very good research subject for maybe somebody who wants to do that. But I'm not in an area where we have dicamba being sprayed, so I can't measure how much of that drift might possibly come through that permeable top layer. This is what happens to many traditional high tunnels. This is an extreme case from the Kansas State University many years ago when they were first beginning to develop the high tunnel program. All it takes is a pretty good wind, and a traditional high tunnel acts like a big kite. And the other issues with high tunnels is the heat buildup. That hot air is trapped in there. You have to raise and lower your side walls and end walls frequently. I had a traditional high tunnel back in Rawlins County, and it was a pretty good sized one. And I'm not a very big girl, and to try and roll up those side walls 4 or 5 times a day in those early spring months was exhausting and sometimes dangerous. I don't know how many of you've ever had one of those roll-up bars get away from you and try and break your arm, but it can happen. It really requires a lot of babysitting. And the other issue with a traditional high tunnel is that it sheds all the natural precipitation. Now, if you live in a high rainfall area, that's a benefit. But in western Kansas, in north central Kansas, in Oklahoma, Texas, Colorado, we want to catch every raindrop we can. we don't want to see it running off the sides of our high tunnel. And there's a variety of ways to try to capture that, but none of them are too effective, and they increase the cost and labor significantly. With the topless high tunnel, that is a non-issue. Pollinators are also an issue with traditional high tunnels. They have trouble getting in, they get confused, they get trapped. I can tell you, standing in my traditional high tunnel, looking up at the interior roof, how many honeybees and bumblebees I'd see banging their heads against the plastic, and it distressed me to think that I was creating an issue for them. This is a picture of my first traditional high tunnel shortly after it was built. It was the first season of growing. I mean, it truly was a food factory. In the past, on a regular exposed garden, I figured if I planted 10 plants, I might get produce from one, you know, between winds, bugs, rabbits, deer, everything. In the high tunnel, I planted 10 plants, I got production from all 10 plants. But they were very labor intensive. I could hardly leave, you know, in those early spring months when the temperature might get up to 85 during the day and it might be 120 inside there. And then that night it might get down to 30. So it was a constant battle of open and close, open and close. Then we had a storm. This was the second year that we had the high tunnel. 80-mile-an-hour straight line winds blew out the north end, tore out the sides. It moved the entire east side of the tunnel over almost 2 feet, just lifted those out of the ground. And we had cement, we had all kinds of reinforcements in there, but 80-mile-an-hour winds they're highly destructive. Well, we repaired it, we continued growing in it, but I continued to consider the idea of a topless high tunnel. It's essentially a paradigm shift in design. It's ideally suited to areas of high winds, limited rainfall, and rapid temperature changes. This is the current topless high tunnel that I have. This is near Luray, Kansas. We're in Russell County. So it's a zone 6, but it has many similar features. High winds, hail, not as small amount of precipitation as Western Kansas, but precipitation is certainly a factor. You want to capture every raindrop you can. So what is a topless high tunnel? It uses a traditional frame. You can have a rounded hoop or a Gothic style, but it reverses the standard design. It has a permeable top, which is anti-hail netting that I got from Greenhouse Megastore. It's a very durable, very interesting fabric. The permeable top lets the rain fall through. It modifies the intensity of the sunlight without blocking it to the extent that plastic does. So that's another benefit of this. You're actually getting more of the solar energy that gives your plants, your fruiting plants, their high quality flavor. I've heard many people say that when you put plastic on and then you add shade cloth over that, you are losing the strength of the sun that creates and I may not be pronouncing this right, the Brix level in your fruiting plants, the sweetness, the flavor. The sides on this one are at 4 feet, the plastic sides, so you're getting a 4-foot block of wind. Now this spring we decided to go ahead and put plastic in this section here, where the poultry netting is showing here. And we did that because the winds proved to be more excessive than I had anticipated. We still get great pollinators coming in through the east wall, but I felt it was important to block that extra wind. And so I would recommend a minimum of 6 feet. So then why should you grow topless? Well, it sounds like fun anyway, but there's no heat buildup. Whatever the ambient temperature is outside, that's what you've got on the inside. So when it's 85 outside, it's not 120 inside. There's no labor to manage ventilation, absolutely none. It's a natural passive exchange of air in there. The wind at the plant level is blocked by the sidewalls, so you don't have the wind shear that a roll up or drop down side can result in. And the full air movement prevents fungal disease, or certainly minimizes it, whereas a traditional high tunnel, the high condensation in there or high humidity can create fungal issues. Natural precipitation falls through the permeable cover, and if you have a heavy rain, that rain is softened. You do lose a very small percentage, and it depends on the strength of the rain. When I measure outside rain gauge levels to the inside rain gauge levels, on a heavy rain, there's very little difference. On a lighter, softer rain, say I get 30 hundredths outside, I might get 25 hundredths on the inside. So there is a little reduction, but it's better than not losing all of it. Pollinators have easy ingress, and the beneficial insects are able to enter and colonize. I had a huge hatching of praying mantids last year. It was just so much fun to see. And it allows for the main goals of a high tunnel. You get the season extension and plant protection. And then here's a quick overview of our first high tunnel. This was back in western Kansas. We were given 2 sets of Gothic frames that had blown apart in eastern Colorado, and we combined those 2 frames. You can see how warped and bent they are, but we combined them into one high tunnel, and we put plastics on the sides. This end wall was made out of Solex. It faced west, and in western Kansas, those western sun is intense. The Solex, which if you're not familiar with, is an awesome product, and it certainly buffered the intensity of the setting sun and blocked the north and west winds. On this one, I covered the perimeter with bags of potting soil. In western Kansas, I had a lot more weed pressure than I do here, but the bags of potting soil kept those weeds from coming up, and I could plant herbs and flowering plants that attracted the beneficial pollinators to it. The top didn't have anti-hail netting, it had bird netting. And here's a picture of the interior of it. It's a little saggy here because we had a hailstorm and it came through and hit some of that, and also the zip strips that we used were not UV protected, and so they got brittle and snapped. But you can see how happy those plants are in there. They were absolutely thriving in that environment. So then we refined the concept. This last spring in 2019, we applied for an NRCS high tunnel grant. Now, it took a little convincing that we were going to do something out of the ordinary, and I had a fairly large document to back up what I was wanting to do, and our great NRCS man, Mr. Ray Gonzalez, said, let's give it a whirl, see what happens. We were approved and inspected, and there it's being built. The structure we used was from Farm Tech, and it's their cold frame system. So the bows are 4 feet apart, and it's a heavier gauge than their traditional high tunnel kits are. So I felt like it was a sturdier structure to begin with. But that's the only thing we bought that was an actual prefab thing. Everything else we created on our own, gathered up all the supplies, thought it all through. Got the hail netting from Greenhouse Megastore. It comes in a 26-foot width, and for us that covered it nicely. If you have a larger tunnel, as Krista's, she is putting in a larger high tunnel, she is seaming hers to create a larger spread. Oh, and also talk about much easier to put on than the full plastic cover. If any of you know how hard that can be, all it takes is a little gust of wind and away you go. But this is very easy to place on top. So we did all of this in actually in under a week. It went very quickly. This is what it looked like in early summer of last year. I run my rows not vertically along or not horizontally along the whole thing. I like shorter rows that I can micromanage, but again, I'm not selling commercial high-end crops, so this is just a personal choice. We're growing food for people to direct market and mostly family use, but I have some customers. It's just to me a more efficient, just psychologically a better way for me for a variety of reasons. Here it is in high summer, and I bought a manometer to measure the wind difference. So last July, it was 17 miles an hour outside, and it was 4 miles an hour inside at the planting level where the plants were. September 17th, 14 miles an hour out of the southeast, and again 4 miles per hour inside. And I didn't have to do anything to manage the walls going up or down. It was all passive, and I could just sit and watch it. It was great. In the fall, I started growing some fall season crops. These are Chinese cabbage plants. Had bamboo hoops to put the floating row cover on. And one of the lovely things about having the solid sidewalls is that you can put floating row cover on and it's not going to take off to the next county. It's protected with very minimal attachments. These are just little plastic clips that hold that up. And that's a huge difference compared to trying to grow outside in 40-mile-an-hour winds. You all know about the different grades of row cover. You can also put shade cloth on if you were wanting to. Then we were getting closer to winter. We knew the first frost was coming. We strung cable across from bow to bow. So that's kind of a nice thing to plan your, if you go in the same axis that I did with the planting, excuse me, you can string floating row cover over it and kind of create a nesting system. Excuse me, I got a tickle in my throat. Talking too much. Sorry. So these lightweight floating row covers, they helped for the first frost. Then I added a second layer for the next frost. But because of the air movement, there was no condensation, and I got to harvest tomatoes quite a lot longer then. Winter, this past December, we had 3 inches of wet snow, and you can see from the interior, it's not sagging at all. There was no stretching. And then you can see the other benefit of having that permeable top. It allows that lovely winter precipitation to come in. It allows for more of the vernalization of it's not the right word, but it allows, you know, some bug reduction because you're getting colder temperatures inside of there. With my original traditional high tunnel, I was getting a pretty large buildup of not the kind of bugs I wanted in there. So this is a help as well. Perhaps many of you know that snow does contain nitrogen and other particulates like sulfur, and which in our area where we're alkaline is beneficial to the soil. And in a traditional high tunnel, heavy snows create an issue of collapse. My traditional high tunnel, multiple times I'd be out there with a big broom trying to knock heavy snow off, and with this I had no issues at all of doing that. When the wind moved it just a little bit, all that snow that was on top just filtered right down inside and onto the beds. And you can see I've even got plants covered with floating row cover in the middle of winter. And then we had an ice storm, which again did not affect it at all. It was the anti-hail netting just sat there like nobody's problem with all that ice on it. And then this is what was growing underneath those floating row covers. So while I did not push at growing something all winter long, it is certainly possible to do that in a topless high tunnel in zone 6. Perhaps not in zone 3, but zone 6 or 5, I think you could have many different types of things. I didn't do spinach, but I'm sure spinach, and this is kale and the Chinese cabbage. It was absolutely delicious in the middle of winter. So early spring, you can get in much, much earlier. February 22nd, these lettuce and kales went in. I just harvested the final plants off of this row last week. And we had been doing a cut and come again harvesting of this row for several weeks. And last week I finally just cleared it out, and now it's planted to carrots. I did cover it for the first few weeks just to help it get rolling and established. These were cabbage and broccoli plants that we're now beginning to harvest. That was in April. And this is a picture of what it looked like in early May. And just lovely green salad, spinach. And again, I'm small scale. I know some of you are growing on a much, much larger commercial scale, but all of this concept is adaptable. It's also adaptable for an existing frame. Say it's time to replace your plastic, or say you have a storm come through and create issues. This might be a way to consider an alternate method of growing an extended season without the main hassles of a regular traditional high tunnel. So in conclusion, it's labor, it reduces labor, it allows natural precipitation, pollinators are free to come and go, no excess heat buildup, reduced fungal disease, and year-round growing is possible. And it's essentially designed for the plain states. I don't think Maine, I don't think Vermont, I'm not even sure about places like Kentucky and Tennessee. I don't know their climates well enough. But for the plain states, which many of us live in, this is a real lifesaver, I think. And for people who are very, very busy, who need to take care of something and get off and get on the tractor or go take care of the cattle or even go do their town jobs, which we certainly did for many years. This reduces a lot of stress. If you're 10 miles away and you see a storm cloud come up, you don't have to race home to button down your high tunnel. It'll just be fine. So that's it. I do have an instruction manual based on this 24 by 36 tunnel that you just saw. It's designed especially to just give a person the concept so that they can adapt it to their own settings. You can modify the ideas, you can make it work with your area, but basically I believe in this, and I think it could really make a big difference for people who are desperately trying to grow food for human beings. So that's it. Thank you. Any questions or discussion?
Alice, great job. Your slides are well appointed. So appreciate that. A lot of experience you packed into that. So we're going to respond now. We have at least what I count 5 people on this call who, besides you, Alice, who have high tunnels, experience with them. So I'm counting those as we've got 2 guests, Deanne from Tarzan down in the Permian Basin. I think she has many, many years of experience with high tunnels. And we've also got Katie Kopaz. She's on the call, and so is Mitzi Jet. So want to ask them. And Krista, I don't know if you are just getting a high tunnel or if you've already have experience with growing in high tunnels. And I think you're in Kansas, is that right? Krista?
Yes, I'm in Kansas. I'm Alice's neighbor, and this is my very first high tunnel.
Okay. Well, good to have you on today. I'm going to ask the other folks that I just named off if they. I have a couple questions coming in on the chat that I'll get to, but I'm going to start off with ask Deanne Yates from Flying Y Farms. Would you just introduce yourself briefly, Deanne, and do you have any comments or points or questions for Alice's presentation?
I do, Daryl, and thank you for the opportunity. And Alice, thank you for putting the presentation together. I think probably everyone on the call is like you. We all want to spend every daylight hour in our gardens. So for you to take that time, it's much appreciated. I'm a lifelong grower, have been operating a commercial farm for the last 15 years now, and have found high tunnels to have a great application with my objectives, which are to have year-round production and have protection from the wind, which is my biggest enemy, for good grain quality, to be plate ready for restaurants or even customers at the farmer market. My problems with high tunnels has been high wind damage. Like you, I lost a tunnel, which by the way, the two tunnels I'm currently growing in are Farm Tech products, and they are 30 by 72. We're in the process of putting up a shade house that size and another high tunnel the same size, 30 by 72. So your presentation is very timely for me trying to address my problems, which again are high wind damage, occasionally hail damage. Maintenance is an issue, kind of one I've just accepted because it goes with using high tunnels. Seasonal shade protection. I have had to replace the canopies on those two high tunnels 2 other times. One was high wind damage. The other one was just deterioration because for the model I have, it deteriorates at that curve or that elbow that comes off the ground within that first 3 feet. Then I guess my wish list for future high tunnels would be to use polycarbonate end walls and possibly at the base, vents at the top, because we're in the hundreds frequently from March through even September. We'll get into triple digits. So like you, venting the tunnels is sometimes a challenge, and better insect control. Those would be my wish lists. For you, Alice, I was curious if you grew winter crops, and you answered that question with the little road tunnels within that. I guess, do you happen to know the UVA value of that hail netting?
I do not have that information on hand. I'm sorry, I don't. It does not show any deterioration at all through this first year. And it does modify the intensity of the sun. It's as though you've got a thin cloud cover.
Right.
So it does diminish some of that, scorching sunlight on there. But from what I read on the Mega Greenhouse or Greenhouse Mega Store, their reviews, many people have been using this out in eastern Colorado, and some of them have said, now there was 1 or 2 bad reviews, but the majority of them said they've lasted quite a long time. So I don't know, I can't answer that exactly.
Well, I can look that information up. I was just, that may be an option for me. Currently, I use the poly fabric from Farm Tech that has a little higher value than just the regular um, canopies, plastic canopies. And I do also put a 50% shade cloth on it from May until September to prevent blistering on peppers. So I am interested in the hail netting from the standpoint of maybe allowing some moisture to come in. Question on that, it looks as if you only use the clamps on your arches to connect that. Do you not use the U-channel and wiggle wire to secure that netting on there?
Hey,
Not on,
Alice, before you respond, could you take it off share and then we'll see people better. Could you stop
oh,
sharing
sure,
and then
sure.
we'll get, and
Okay,
then there. Great. Now,
okay.
thank you.
Yes, to answer that, along the side walls, it has channel wire and, or, well, actually on this one, we used a batten tape and rolled the edges, and then we used a screw with a big washer to hold it to the
Right,
hip board.
right.
But on the end walls, or the last bows, we used the clamps. We did not put any clamps on the interior bows at all, and are very happy with it.
Okay,
We felt that that might possibly abrade on the,
right,
so we did not use it, and we've not needed it. There's been no moving or sagging at all. Now,
okay,
I did recommend to Krista, we're helping Krista build hers. Hers is a larger system, and we encouraged to put another purlin at the center, at the peak, to help support that in between the bows.
okay. I get what you're saying. Yeah,
When hers is completed, I'll take some pictures of that, and I have a Facebook page, and I'll add that to it. But we don't know if that was necessary, but we felt it wasn't a bad thing to add to it just in case.
right, right. Well, it sounds like, at least for my area, our weather is similar to yours. 2 weeks ago, we had a crosswind 77.4 miles an hour for 4.5 hours. So it's not just a blow up off of a cloud. It'll really work on those high tunnels, and I like the idea of that being open, because that's where you lose even frame problems, is all of that thousands and thousands of pounds pushing up through there. And I can see how that netting would let that escape.
That's very true. What I would like to say is, in my traditional tunnel on a windy day, and again, we have those sustained winds that can last for 3 days, 30, 40, 50 mile an hour winds with
Right.
gusts, and
Right.
inside my traditional tunnel, it creaked and moaned, and you could actually
Yes.
see the bows moving. And in this high tunnel, again, it's a smaller version, but with that air just being able to pass through, there's not a wiggle in it. It's really just pleasant to watch.
More stable, you think?
Much more stable. It's not going to lift up and pull out of the ground. The only wind pressure is against those sidewalls, and that's minimal because it's at the lower end and not nearly the surface area.
Okay. Two more quick questions. I don't want to hog the time. If there's time allowed, I have a list. But you said you had better performance with pollinators getting in through there. So if you have put a solid material where you had the chicken wire, and now you just have the netting as the only entrance into your tunnels, so you still have moths that will come in through that?
Now on the end wall, on the only end wall that's exposed, because we built this up against an existing building, so the east end wall, from 4 foot on up, is poultry wire, chicken wire.
Okay.
So
Okay.
bumblebees, and yes, I do have cabbage moths who have wanted to infiltrate, but I have the good bugs able to come in as well.
Right.
So
Right.
it's not an enclosed that prevents the ladybugs and prevents the ones that we want. And so it's the poultry wire that allows that ingress of pollinators.
I see. I see. Um,
Dan,
okay. I guess that's it. I guess the only thing I'm still trying to get my head around is if I could maintain the heat in it to germinate successive crops through the winter. That's my only question that would still be outstanding.
Yeah, germination is, and of course, what zone are you in?
I'm in zone 8, but we
Oh,
can have, right when you're wanting to germinate something, have 4 degrees for.
yeah. I would say that by itself, no, but you could certainly add multiple layers. You could even, create a in-ground cold frame possibly,
Right.
or if you used, 2 or 3 layers of floating row cover. According to Elliott Coleman, every layer is another zone.
Yes,
And
yes.
so I don't know about, everybody's circumstances are different. I guess it would depend on what you're germinating. If it's something that requires really warm temperatures, your ground
Right.
level is going to be cold too.
Right.
that's a gamut. That's a gamut of good questions, Deanne.
Yes.
Thank you. That's really
Thank
great. Let me check with, we got a couple on the chat, but I'm going to ask first, and we'll get to those. But Katie Kopaz, you're growing there in Kiowa County. Do you have any comments or questions for Alice?
I just wanted to let her know that it was really informational and I enjoyed hearing what she had to say about stuff and gave me a lot of interesting ideas about high tunnels. I've considered doing a high tunnel before because you can get a little more funding and different things for high tunnels, but I haven't done it yet. So definitely a lot of food for thought.
Thank you. I would like to say that each state's NRCS guidelines are slightly different. I was pushing the envelope on this one. It truly met every one of Kansas standards of practice for it. I went through it carefully and checked off everything. And but each state's different. You would really want to qualify with your NRCS representative before you assume that they would go with this.
Right.
It's silly, but it's just a brand new idea and people aren't always willing to think about new ideas.
Right.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Thanks, Katie. How about Mitzi? Are you still on the call, Mitzi? Do you have any questions or comments? You're growing in Baca County. Okay, I saw Mitzi.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to say I appreciated the presentation, a lot of good information. I did grow 1 year in my high tunnel with only shade cloth. I put the shade cloth on rather than replace the plastic 1 year. And I agree, things really, really thrive. Something that just came to mind as a presentation when we were talking about high winds. I traditionally have had my one big tunnel north-south oriented. And I most recently put up my new tunnel east-west oriented. And I just wanted to comment on the difference in the wind. And it's just beating the heck out of the east-west orientation tunnel, and the north-south tunnel. It doesn't seem to affect it like it does the other orientation. I wanted to throw that out there.
The high tunnel, my traditional high tunnel that you saw the storm damage on, it was a north-south orientation. This one here is east-west just because of the convenience of it. I would believe that north-south is a better orientation for most people in this latitude, but a big wind, I'm glad you're having better success with the one, and that's good information to keep track of. It sure is.
Well,
Thank,
anybody,
thank
go
you
ahead.
again.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Mitzi, thanks for being on and sharing your thoughts. One comment I want to make quickly before we get to some other questions is I'm glad we're recording this because you know, young women who are interested in working on this. I mean, look at all this knowledge, Alice, you have, and the other women on this call. So I just think it's pretty cool. That's why I've held Justin out. I didn't want him to mess up all the voices of women this morning. So yeah, the amount of experience and knowledge contained in what you all have been doing is really impressive. You can get into how to do the elbows and fabrics and all that kind of stuff that we need for really good tunnels. So excellent. We have another guest I want to get to, and then I'll go to those questions in the chat box. Justin Trammell, he's in near Amarillo. He's in Canyon, Texas. So Justin, you're using a greenhouse. Do you have any questions or comments for Alice?
Well, I really like your setup. Your setup addresses all the issues that I don't like about the one that I have. Now, currently, it's only a 16 by 40, so it's nothing super fancy. And I actually did a double layer plastic over it with a blower, and that's helped take on a lot of the wind and that kind of stuff. And actually, I've gone to using it primarily to start my poultry because I have a whole lot of different things I do, a lot of poultry being one of them. So that's actually what's in there right now for the most part. I do have some tomatoes I'm putting in, but I like that setup, and actually I'm going to be building another much bigger tunnel hopefully this fall at least. And I think I'm going to go that way because at least here in the Panhandle, it seems like that if you can control that wind that's hitting stuff, you can it makes all the difference in the world. So I think that I don't see any reason you wouldn't be able to grow your winter crops, you know, just through the entire winter with that. I might actually use my other greenhouse to start plants and then just move them into there. But I really do appreciate that, and that's probably what I'm going to go with next. So.
All right. Well, Alice, we have a couple of questions here, and anybody else who has them, just put them in the chat box or interrupt if you need to. I mean, it won't be interrupting. We're getting to the last quarter of the call, but one question is, could you say more about the season extension if you have the same temperature inside and outside? How is this topless high tunnel extending the growing season?
And that's a good question. And the way you answer that is the fact that you can use the floating row covers without them blowing away. So as I mentioned, Elliot Coleman, he's my garden guru. If you don't know his work, he's certainly somebody to pursue. He claims every layer is adding a zone. And so especially if you can create air spaces in between. So as I mentioned, I had that lettuce and kale put out in February in the garden, in the high tunnel, and it was thriving with just I used 2 layers of floating row cover, and it wasn't even the heaviest row cover, and it got it through so that it could be in full production way before a traditional garden would be. Now, a traditional high tunnel is certainly going to be warmer because it traps more hot air, but then you've got all of the headaches that go along with it. So you do get season extension on both ends, early planting and then later harvests as well. It does create a microclimate, and then it gives you that ability to add those extra layers without them being ripped off into the next county.
Okay.
I hope that answers it.
Liza, do you have a follow-up on that, or does that answer your question?
No, that answers my question. Thank you. We're in zone 4 and have high winds, and so this is really compelling.
Thank you.
All right. Another question here in the chat box is from Linnea, and she's saying, what about weed control in the inside of the tunnel? Do you have something before you? Did you do something before you built the tunnel to control weeds? Big struggle in eastern Colorado, southeast Colorado, anywhere is bindweed, or she just bindweeded her house, spreading all over inside here. So what do you, how do you handle weed control inside?
We have bindweed here. We never fought that back in western Kansas, although that was something that we were aware of. Here in north central Kansas, it is epidemic. I used lots and lots of mulch. Now, when we were getting ready to build this particular high tunnel, it was sod, it was weeds, it was, I think there maybe had been a dog pen on it at one time, lots of debris. We had a lot of cleanup to do before we started. So I pre-tilled for one season, and then I planted a winter cover crop on it. Then the next season we built it, and I just basically used lots of mulch, lots of hand weeding. But once that high tunnel is like that, I never bring a tiller in. It's all layering and hand pulling. So in this particular tunnel, it's doing quite well. Back in western Kansas, we had kochia or fireweed, whatever you want to call it, that you could turn around and it was 3 feet tall behind you and you just weeded it. I don't have that issue here. But bindweed, you just keep pulling and pulling, and eventually you starve it out. But it is an issue. However, they say it's highly nutritious, and if you put it in your compost pile before it goes to seed, it adds a lot of nutrients to your compost. But I don't know, that's something to think about.
Or you can take it out and give it to your chickens or your goats.
Yes, absolutely. Cows like it.
Yeah, Justin's just saying it's an amazing animal feed.
It is. It pulls nutrients from so deep in the earth. Use what you don't like.
Okay, I have a couple of questions, and anybody else as well. So you haven't said much about labor. I see you have Jeff, your husband, there helping on construction. How much labor does it take to fully operate your tunnels?
Very, very minimal. The most important thing in my category is you have to be passionate enough to the first thing you want to do when you get up in the morning is to be out there in it and all day long. It's very difficult to be working other jobs. Fortunately, I can do what I want to now, but as far as labor compared to a traditional garden or a traditional high tunnel, it is much reduced, greatly reduced. No watering, unless you have an extended drought, and I collect rainwater off of our garage and use the rainwater to deep soak the high tunnel. But if you have a regular rainfall amount, you're not hauling hoses in and out because you've already got that water in there. You don't have the tillage issues because your beds are permanent. At least in mine, each of my beds is permanent, and I just keep building up and the soil gets better. I would say it's pleasurable. It's not labor intensive. It's all pleasure.
Okay. Alice, you're busy answering questions, but at some point before you get off the call, if you could just put in the chat box that reference to Elliot Coleman, any books of his,
Okay.
or anything like that. But I have another question for you, and that I'm sure this is of interest to our listeners, people on the call, the participants. What about costs? I mean, what are some ballpark figures on these on costs for these kind of structures?
In the book that I wrote, I kept track of all of the costs. Now I cannot do a cost to cost comparison to a kit because there isn't a 24 by 36 option in the Farm Tech, complete kit system. So I can't do an exact apples to apples comparison. I would say it is no more in the respect that what you're getting is a much better quality product that you're not going to have to be repairing frequently. 1 year, my traditional high tunnel, I grew in it for 1 year, and the second year we were rebuilding the darn thing, and that added considerable cost. So I can't answer that exactly.
Okay.
But I would say it's pretty close to similar. And we got fully funded from NRCS on it, which is huge. That's about 2/3 of the cost.
that makes for a good follow-up question here from Justin. Just wondering if you have that resource you talked about that supported your idea for this topless high tunnel that you pitched to NRCS. Is that something you could share?
Well, he's our local representative. Every extension, or not extension, every FSA office has their own NRCS person.
Right, but the whatever you put together, your study or your,
My application.
yeah, so or not your application, but just what could a grower use to convince NRCS that this modified or this topless high tunnel is something they should fund?
Well, I would guess maybe my book might be helpful to them. It outlines all of the benefits. And what they need to do is, because I said each state has its own, and maybe even each county, I'm not sure, has its own guidelines. New Mexico is very, very open to new ideas. New Mexico's awesome. But you need to go to your state official, your person, get their application and go through it paragraph by paragraph and say, this satisfies it, this satisfies it, this satisfies it. And then you should be okay. If they have requirements that are different than mine, it might not.
Okay. Could you?
Hey, Daryl,
yeah.
may I interject something real quick? I use NRCS to help our operation also, and it's a great way for you to fund your project, whether it's going to be a hobby farm, a market farm, commercial or non-commercial. But I agree with Alice in that you just have to go in, make an appointment with them and go in there and work with them. And right now, from everything that I've been getting from USDA, is a great time because the government is trying to help small farms better than I've ever seen them before. We grow cotton, we have cattle, we have wheat, hay. I've never seen them try to be more cooperative. Anyway, be more open-minded about small farms. It may be one of the good things that's come out of some of the issues going on right now is people are understanding how important small farms are to their local food sheds. So there's two things people tell me when I talk to them about contacting NRS to see if that's applicable for their project. They say, well, I just hate to use government money. Remember, this is your money. You've paid taxes for all this year, so not to you benefit from it to help other people. I just don't see the logic in that. And I think people don't really realize that. But don't take no for an answer. I've had to work with an adjoining counties NRCS operator to get accurate information, not because our local one at the time he just had no experience with it. And actually it was his suggestion to just not just use him for a resource. So even county to county to county within your state, don't give up until you get the answer you want.
Good advice, Deanne, thanks. So I see Alice has put the title of that book from Elliot Coleman in the chat box, so we'll make sure that everybody sees that. We're getting down to the last 5 minutes or so of the call. Any more questions from any or comments from anybody? Like Fernando, do you have any, as a chef, what are you seeing? Or
I'm jealous. I told you I want one for my backyard. I actually want to put it in my backyard, but no, it's really interesting, and I hope to see more of that here in the city. Honestly, to my local CSA, they've been out of shares, so we need more of that.
And I'd like to mention about as far as cities and urban, these are pretty tunnels. These are prettier than the traditional high tunnel. I think if you look at just a fully enclosed plastic shape, it's not very aesthetic. But for some reason, the topless high tunnel has a natural beauty to it. And when you're inside of it, you can see the sky and the clouds go over, which is another pleasant aspect of it. So anyway, thank you.
And like you said, the name is super cool, so I'm gonna look for more.
Alice, can you put yeah, a link to your book or something, or just in the chat box?
Sure. It's available on Amazon both as an ebook, which I would recommend because you can enlarge the pictures and get more detail, and they're clearer pictures. And it has a step-by-step instruction manual of how to build this particular shape and size, but it's very adaptable to any shape or size. But yes, I'll put that in there. I'll add that in there.
Okay. All right. Well, great, great presentation. Really good information. And this will be in the link that we send out afterwards, where you can go back and watch this again, or listen, or pass it on to anyone who wants to learn about topless high tunnels. For our next call in 2 weeks, we're going to get into local procurement of increasing local access in Southeast Colorado. So we're going to have a panel. So every time it's a little different. Next time it's a panel, and Jessica will be on that panel. Jessica, can you just say quickly what you will cover next time?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So just going to cover Live Well, Colorado, and what we do as an organization to increase access to Colorado grown fruits, vegetables, proteins, grains, etc., through the different programs that we have. And one of the programs that I run with Chef Fernando to help get more local products in our institutions as well.
Great. So we look forward to having you on in 2 weeks, and you'll have a couple slides. We'll have Chuck Hannigan. Chuck, are you still on the call? Might have had to get off. Anyway, he's a grower, and he has experience with selling to institutions, to restaurants, and to just a customer base. I forget the third thing. Anyway, and then we'll have a couple of, we'll have somebody from a cafeteria, manages the cafeteria at the hospital in Springfield, or possibly the Walsh Community Market. So, but there's some really great information that Jessica will bring with Fernando about these workshops you were putting on. Low Pro
Co. I like to say we're crazy, so but we're not crazy enough to name it Loco Pro.
Okay, so that's 2 weeks on the 17th of June, 8 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Central. And you all will receive the link ahead of time and a reminder about the call. And then after that, we'll just have one more call to finish the entire summit. And that will be John Whitler talking about implementation, the next steps for Ark Valley, Southeast Colorado, local food production, local food, Southeast Colorado, Ark Valley food shed. There we go. Anyway, really great stuff, and thank you all for your time and for participating, your questions. And Alice, great presentation, and thanks to our panelists like Deanne, great to have you on. Now you can get back out there and grow some more vegetables, and Mitzi and Katie and Justin. So everybody have a great rest of the week, and we'll hope to see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.